Thanks, John. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. You'll note in my PowerPoint presentation, I have listed for you in the first couple of slides some of the major changes that were introduced in the statutory accident benefits changes that occurred on June 1st, 2016. In the interest of time, I will not go through all of them in detail. However, if you skip to number 4, I will go through the major changes to the catastrophic impairment definition, as I think they are important in light of the topic of today's webinar. The first change is with respect to the Glasgow Coma Scale. In the old legislation, our clients were able to get an automatic designation of catastrophic if they scored 9 or less out of a total of 15 using the Glasgow Coma Scale. Under the new legislation, this is not possible. The second major change is with respect to the mental behavioral impairment. So what I'm referring to here is catastrophic assessment using the 4th edition of the AMA guides, the American Medical Association guides, 4th edition. In the old legislation, we required 1 marked or class 4 impairment or 1 extreme or class 5 impairment in order to receive a catastrophic designation. Under the new legislation, we now require 3 marked impairments or 1 extreme impairment in order to qualify as catastrophic. So this is another significant change. Thirdly, with respect to adult brain injury impairment, the criteria under this change requires that there has to be positive findings on either a CAT scan, an MRI, or what the SABS terms as other recognized brain diagnostic technology. It's still up in the air a little bit in terms of exactly what this means, but if the positive findings on one of these tests is combined with the results on the GOSI, or the Glasgow Outcome Scale Extended, meaning a vegetative state at the 1-month mark, lower or upper severely disabled at the 6-month mark, or lower moderately disabled at the 1-year mark, then our clients can qualify as catastrophic. And finally, with respect to the change in catastrophic definition is with respect to pediatric brain injury. It's good that this area has been added to the SABS for our minor clients. And these criteria include that the youth has to be accepted for admission as an inpatient to a public hospital named in the superintendent's guide and have the positive findings on the CAT scan, the MRI, or the other recognized brain diagnostic technology that I just discussed. Or they have to be accepted for admission to a pediatric neurorehabilitation facility, or they can be vegetative at the 1-month mark using the King's Outcome Scale for childhood head injury, and this is sometimes referred to as the COSHI or the COSHI, or they can be at the 6-month mark severely disabled using this same tool. Or an additional criteria this SABS has indicated is that at the 9-month mark, if the minor is not age appropriately independent and requires in-person supervision or assistance for physical, cognitive, or behavioral impairments the majority of their waking day, then they can qualify for catastrophic under the new legislation. So I want to talk a little bit about an article that was actually written in 1998, but is recognized by the new SABS as being a very important one with respect to catastrophic assessment. And it's an article that was written by Wilson, Pettigrew, and Teasdale called Structured Interviews for the Glasgow Outcome Scale and the Extended Glasgow Outcome Scale Guidelines for their use. So the SABS does refer assessors to this article and the guidelines that the authors do put forth. The authors did recognize a couple of flaws with respect to the tools, and the guidelines were introduced as assessors for us to keep in mind when we're doing the assessments. And I'll go through those briefly. Number 1, disability due to head injury is defined by a change in pre-injury status. So where were your clients in terms of functioning prior to the collision or the accident, and where are they functioning now? Number 2, only pre-injury status and current status should be considered. So this is referring to the importance of not being swayed in our opinions by an amazing recovery that the client potentially might have had from the date of loss to the time when the assessment is being completed, or hopes or aspirations for your client's recovery for the future. It reminds us that we need to complete the assessment considering the client's status prior to the accident compared to where they're functioning now. Thirdly, disability must be a result of mental, meaning cognitive or emotional, or physical impairments, or both, resulting from a traumatic brain injury. So it's important to note here, there has to be a diagnosis of traumatic brain injury in order for assessments to be completed for catastrophic using the GOSI. And finally, the fourth guideline that they put forth is for us to use the best source of information available. So this speaks to the importance of completing collateral interviews if your client will, for example, provide consent to you to speak to their loved ones, their employers, anybody who can paint for us a fuller picture in terms of where the clients were functioning prior to the accident compared to now. And on your screen here, I apologize for the small print, but I know that you do have the PDF available, so feel free to print this off and to use it. It is a quick reference guide that I developed myself for quick use, as opposed to having to pull out all of the information when we have a client that we're working with and we think that potentially they might qualify as catastrophic. You'll note on the left-hand side of the screen, the scores of the Glasgow Outcome Scale are listed, followed by the next column, which is the outcome category. The next column is a little clock. So this column indicates the timelines and the SABS criteria. And in the final column on the right, there is the level of functional impairment. And again, because of timelines this morning, I will not go through it in detail, but if anybody has any questions about it or wants to discuss it, feel free to give me a call and we can set up a time to chat. But for example, if you scroll down to score number 5, if you're working with a client at the 1-year mark, for example, and your client is unable to work, if they are working potentially only in a sheltered workshop or in a non-competitive type of job, or they are rarely, if ever, taking part in previously enjoyed social and leisure activities, or if there is a constant disruption, meaning a daily and intolerable disruption to their family relationships and their friendships, at the 1-year mark, this would be determined to be a lower moderate disability using the GOSI, and using this tool, your client will qualify for catastrophic at this point. So moving right along then to the catastrophic assessment using the 4th edition of the AMA Guides, Chapter 14, and the 4 spheres of functioning. These 4 spheres are activities of daily living, social functioning, concentration, persistence, and pace, and adaptation. The first one, activities of daily living, is fairly self-explanatory, but what we're looking for here when we're assessing are changes to the client's ability to engage in their self-care activities, their personal hygiene, communication, ambulation, travel. Have there been changes to their sexual functioning? How has their sleep been affected? And are they engaging in social and recreational activities? The second sphere, social functioning, is also fairly well understood. It's defined by the AMA Guides as the capacity to interact appropriately and communicate effectively with other individuals. So this is whether or not your clients are presenting to you as what you would consider to be socially mature. The third sphere, concentration, persistence, and pace, defined again by the AMA Guides as the ability to sustain focused attention long enough to permit timely completion of an activity, or of a task, sorry. The key phrase here is the timely completion of an activity. How long did it take your clients to complete activities prior to their accident or their collision? How long is it taking them to do activities now? Are they in fact able to complete their functional tasks without being distracted by something in their environment, or by their pain, or by their anxiety, and so forth? And the fourth sphere is adaptation, deterioration or decompensation in work or work-like settings, or repeated failure to adapt to stressful circumstances. So how do our clients how are they affected by the introduction of stress into the performance of their activities of daily living? A couple of key things I wanted to point out here. A psychological diagnosis is an absolute requirement when assessing under Chapter 14 of the AMA Guides for Catastrophic. As I mentioned, we now need 3 Class 4 impairments or 1 Class 5 impairment to be deemed catastrophic. Collateral information, again, is very important here. Talk to people that the clients will provide us consent to speak to. And these assessments are done typically at the 2-year mark, or when a physician has deemed that our clients are medically stable. And to clue up my portion of this morning's webinar to start, I wanted to summarize for you the key points for rehab providers in my opinion. The first one is know the Glasgow Outcome Scale Extended, know the 4th edition, Chapter 14 of the AMA guides, and talk the talk in your assessment reports in the very beginning of the file, in your treatment reports as your treatment with your clients go along. Know these areas so that when the time comes to assess for catastrophic, your file is being prepared in that manner. Also know the Glasgow Outcome Scale and its scoring. If you do have accidents prior to June 1st, 2016, potentially they may qualify for catastrophic using the Glasgow Outcome Scale itself. Next, speak to the quality and the frequency of changes to your client's ability to engage in their previously enjoyed activities of daily living compared to the quality and the frequency of those activities now. If you look at the Glasgow Outcome Scale Extended, for example, a client can actually qualify for catastrophic based in a change in the quality and a change in the frequency of their ability to engage in those tasks. Prior to the legislation changes in the old days, I think we've always mentioned clients enjoyed walking their dog or going to bingo or playing basketball, for example, prior to the accident. Currently, my recommendation to you is talk about the number of times that they did that. They played basketball daily for an hour prior to the accident. Currently, they're playing once a month, for example, if they're still doing that. Know the Wilson, Pettigrew, and Teasdale article. Know the Glasgow Outcome Scale Extended and the results, and know the guidelines that the article does put forth to us to follow as rehab providers when assessing in this realm. Use activities of daily living or ADL checklist, for example, and this will also help paint a better picture of the client's functioning prior to the accident compared to now. Do situational assessments. These are very important. Real life examples speak to people. So take your clients, assess them in their homes if you're able, assess them in the community, and put that information in your reports. Collateral interviews again, I'll stress the importance of talking to people that knew the clients prior to the accidents, employers, loved ones, in order to again paint that full picture and to get an idea of how the client was functioning prior to the accident. Communicate with your referral sources. If you know the language and the terminology that we're using here this morning, don't wait for the 6-month mark to highlight to your lawyers or your insurance companies if you think they may qualify for catastrophic. Start having these conversations at the 4-month mark, the 5-month mark, so that when the 6-month mark comes or the 1-year mark comes, you're ready to complete the catastrophic assessment. And finally, highlight both the positive changes in function, but also highlight ongoing areas of dysfunction in your reports. I think as rehab providers, it's really important for us to indicate how our clients are reaching their goals in terms of their function and how they're functioning well as a result of our treatment. But please also include and highlights the areas of dysfunction that they are continuing to have, because as the 6-month mark or the 1-year mark approaches, this information will be very important to paint that history. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. That was a wonderful talk. And a takeaway from that talk is this, in my view. You have to know the definitions, the new definitions of catastrophic impairment for this reason, and this is why the talk is so beneficial. Knowing what the criteria are for the new definitions, you can write your reports from the get-go, keeping in mind the definitions, so you can write your reports into the definition of the criteria if they're there. The other thing that I thought was so important in what Brenda said was collateral sources. If you not only get information from the injured person, but from family members and other sources, you will have a larger database than someone who does an insurer examination. And if the case does go through the dispute resolution process, you may have an advantage because your database of information will be larger. So thank you for that, Brenda. That was a wonderful talk.